Thank you very much, Stephen, for the kind introduction, and thank you to the ARM group for the invitation to be here today. Over the next 15 minutes, I'll just share with you a bit of background on CTI. We are the leading global research provider in cell and gene therapy. The company was formed almost 25 years ago and has been part of more than 10,000 projects since inception. Has a global footprint to be able to take early stage studies and expand them to any place where the patient population might be relevant and to where the ultimate commercial success is chosen for. The company has an industry-leading employee retention that exceeds 90%, and it has been in that range, 90 to 95%, for more than 10 years. We know how challenging that can be in the current environment especially. We are a full-service clinical research organization with a global platform, as mentioned, employees in more than 65 countries. We have had a consistent growth since inception, a highly focused therapeutic area from company's inception, where we focus primarily on complex and critically ill patient populations. More than 80% of both the former trials and current trials are in rare disease, and 50% of all projects over the last 5 years have involved cell or gene therapies. As such, we have the most experience of any clinical research organization in those particular areas. The company has a full service of clinical offerings, and I'll highlight some of those in the coming moments. We are one of the 20 largest clinical research organizations in the world. We are actually the oldest and largest privately owned clinical research organization where the founders are still active. We work on behalf of more than 250 pharma, biotech, med device, diagnostic, as well as academic sponsors across the world. And we have been part of more than 165 approvals. And we think ultimately when you have conversations like are happening here at this meeting, we talk about how do we move products into the clinic and through the clinic, ultimate to commercial availability. The global presence, as mentioned, allows us to basically support clinical research on every continent. We feel very proud of the fact that we have been part of some of the earliest cell and gene therapy programs dating back more than a dozen years. And as you'll see in one of the upcoming slides, we have been part of almost half of all the cell and gene therapies that have been approved by FDA, EMA, PMDA, and others across the globe. We feel like our global footprint, as well as our ability to support emerging companies from their earliest stages, is a real differentiator for CTI. We have been the recipient of a number of awards from third parties who judge clinical research organizations in an independent fashion, where the feedback is coming from the pharma or biotech industry. We've been rated a number of times over the last few years as the highest ranked clinical research organization in the world, and this includes quality, expertise, reliability, and compatibility, among other things. Our service offerings, as mentioned, are broad. We start at the earliest stages where products are preclinical. Many of our emerging companies have just literally been birthed from academic spin-offs, and we're able to go to the regulatory authorities on their behalf, negotiate the pathway basically to get from where they are, do the tech transfer, and move into preclinical and then ultimately clinical, including the pre-INDs and INDs, et cetera, that need to be filed and agreed upon. From a clinical operations perspective, we have a full spectrum of clinical operations, all the things that you would need, whether it's a first-in-man proof of concept study up to a very, very large phase 3 registration program. Actually, we have our own research site and are able to many times be the bridge from preclinical to clinical if studies require particularly unique indications. We can do first-in-man, single escalating dose, multiple dose, drug-drug interaction studies. We can also do rather extensive pharmacokinetics. One of our recent offerings over the last few years is laboratory services. We have found that the emerging biotech and the emerging pharma companies frequently do not get the priorities that they need from the large global laboratories. And so we have built laboratory programs. In fact, one here in Spain, in Bilbao. It offers both bioanalytical as well as safety, biorepository, and all the type of testing that one might need to take a cell or gene therapy program from preclinical into the clinic and through commercialization. And then finally, we have a large global group in the real-world evidence area that gets involved in pricing, reimbursement, as well as health technology and market access studies. And this is becoming increasingly more important, as you heard in a couple of the presentations yesterday, and I think there's more focus later this afternoon on that topic. I want to highlight the global regulatory support. This is a place where we find there are many deficiencies, where emerging companies are either given advice that's inadequate, incomplete, or just inaccurate. We are able to span the gamut from the earliest preclinical interactions with things like Interact meetings all the way through, as mentioned, to pre-IND and IND. I would say at any given time we have as many as 40 or 50 pharma or biotech companies that we are working with moving through this process. And then obviously, as we move into the clinic, we're able to support end of phase 1, end of phase 2, and then ultimately BLA or NDA applications to support the ultimate approval or clearance. A particular note for programs here in Europe, as we have an extensive team with 13 offices across Europe that regularly is involved in cell and gene therapy studies, moving from first in man all the way through to the approvals. We, in the last 5 years, have developed both through organic means and acquisition a global team that does model-informed drug development. And this is particularly, I think, a challenge for many companies as you think about your viral vector or your cell therapy work, is what is the appropriate dose to be utilized in my first-in-man study, route of administration in order to maximize efficacy and potentially minimize toxicities, and at the same time trying to do this in a financially meaningful way. This model-informed drug development group has really extensive experience across all spectrum, rare diseases, pediatrics, and across many different indications. They have moved from primarily focusing over 15 years ago in small molecules into large molecules, including cell products and gene products. And what we have found is that the regulatory authorities are very open in the Interact meetings and the preclinical meetings to discuss how this model-informed drug development can ascertain the optimal dose to start your studies with, and then at the same time to minimize the number of cohorts that need to be utilized. Particularly in the modeling for AAV, for lentivirus, for retrovirus, as well as cell-based products. There's extensive experience in both the consultancy as well as being able to do the pharmacokinetic, pharmacodynamic analysis, as mentioned, to support dose selection going into your studies. I wanted to highlight the laboratory services. As mentioned, we have been in the lab business since inception of CTI 24 years ago, but we, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, have grown this significantly. What we were finding is that in the areas of regenerative medicine, sponsors were having challenge, whether it was tech transfer of assays or development of new assays, even in the CDMO space, the ability to support things along the lines of lot release, potency, sterility, et cetera. So we have built a global laboratory platform in order to support those type of testings. Beyond that, we're able to provide the typical safety testing that's needed, either for inclusion, exclusion criteria to get into studies. We're able to do the typical supply kit building. Many of you might have had relatively challenging experiences over the last few years with supply chain issues. We're able to do that. At the same time, our biorepositories are able to store samples, as many of you know, are required by regulatory authorities for sometimes up to 10 or 15 years. We do those on site, and we have the capabilities, obviously, to, if there's any retesting needed or any sample transfer needed, to be able to do that in literally a matter of hours instead of days or weeks. This group also is able to support programs in North America, Latin America, in Europe and in the Middle East, Africa region. So it really is a global network of lab services. Just recently, in fact, I leave here on a Friday. We'll move up to Bilbao, Spain, where we are opening an expanded laboratory there. It is almost 40,000 square feet of laboratory space that is being developed and actually has been accredited already by the authorities that allow additional testing with highly unique therapies like cell and gene therapies. One of the things to particularly highlight is we find a lot of challenges in multi-center, multinational studies where lab testing methodologies are different from one laboratory to another. In our model, we utilize the same methodologies, the same instrumentation, the same reagents, and obviously the locations are inspected and accredited by the local, national, and international authorities, and this can give one, I think, great confidence in the results and the use of those results to support approvals. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, CTI has been part of almost half of all the current approvals for cell and gene therapy by both FDA and EMA, among others. More than 90% of all of the programs that we have worked in the cell and gene therapy, we have ultimately had second and third and fourth opportunities as those studies have moved forward into the clinic. So taking a first-in-man proof of concept, moving it through ultimately to the registration studies, showing really strong relationships with the sponsor and CTI. Our medical affairs team is extensively experienced in regenerative medicine with more than 15 physicians that are able to support all different indications and have extensive cell and gene therapy backgrounds as well. I highlighted earlier that we have been part of what we believe is an industry-leading support of cell and gene therapy with more than 100 trials active, that in fact we work currently with more than 50 sponsors globally in this field. I think when I looked at the agenda for this three-day meeting, I saw almost 30 companies presenting that CTI is currently working with and or has worked with in the past. If you look at the overall bulk of the work within CTI, 2/3 of the work involves some type of regenerative medicine, making us the most experienced company in the industry. Relative to whether it be cell therapy or gene therapy, we have extensive experience with virtually all the regulatory authorities globally, able to be an addition to your team as you move forward in these important activities, and whether it be specific vectors or specific routes of administration. I think one of the things that we've seen, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, is more novel routes of administration, right, resulting in obviously more optimal delivery of the product and hopefully minimization of side effects. This slide just highlights over the last 18 months or so FDA, EMA, and other geographic approvals that we have been part of, and you can see that a number of the cell and gene programs that have been presented at this meeting in past years and this year we've been able to support. And to give you a sense, our initial experience goes all the way back to some of the earliest pioneers in this field like Spark Therapeutics, Bluebird Bio, Kite Therapeutics, Novartis, where we were able to support those programs over the last 10 or 12 years. And in fact, many of those patients are still in long-term follow-up studies that we are actively involved in. And this is actually a slide from one of the ARM presentations earlier in the year. Just wanted to highlight, I believe it's 7 or 8 of the approvals from the past year or expected approvals this year. We have been able to partner with those companies in moving the process forward. We feel like we offer a very unique model relative to a number of the competitors in the industry. We are highly focused in this therapeutic area. We have a large series of relationships at the site level that we're able to utilize to the benefit of our sponsors. We also have a long history with the regulatory authorities, and we think we can develop what is a very, very unique, but one that is a very achievable regulatory plan based on past experience. And just to give you a sense, if you look at the overall history of our experience over the last decade, Roughly about 50% of the work is in the cell area and about 50% in the gene area. It is split historically in a almost even fashion between autologous and allogeneic. And if you look at our overall vector experience, you can see it's heavily weighted towards AAV and lenti, with retrovirus being the third most common. But it's quite a broad and comprehensive set of experience that we're part of. So finally, I'll just leave you with, we feel like we are leaders in the cell and gene therapy space, with the most experienced clinical research organization, have worked on a very high percentage of the approved products, have a large geographic footprint that allows us to support very complex treatments around the globe, and a full suite of service offerings that are able to be utilized. So thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning.